Okay, so here's a pretty fun matchup. We have a 3v3 between Skaven. We've got the Dark Elves, played by myself, and the Beastmen over here, played by my buddy Justice. Skaven, I didn't mention, that's my friend MR as well. So on the other side, we've got front line with mostly chaff units from the vampire counts, and then also mostly chaff units from the Bretonnians as well. There are 3 units of Graveguard and a Claw of Nagash anchoring the front line, and then you've got a Blood Dragon Vamp Lord as well. So obviously the plan is to just tie everything up and then look for ganks. And then we've got a pretty standard, more balanced build from Norsca with some wolves, some Fimir, and some marauders in the front line. So this is really where the killing power is for the other team. They've got a group of Royal Pegasus Knights chevroned up to the max. There's 3 units, a Paladin, and Elbrick. So obviously they're going to be looking for blood. And just really quickly to talk about this map, it's an interesting map because on the outskirts you have some woods, and then here you have a giant hill. So there's different philosophies about whether or not it makes sense to rush for the hill. If you have the hill, you can kind of look down on the rest of the battlefield, whereas if you are off in the woods, you have the safety of being able to have that cover, and you can kind of shoot up on everything that's exposed here on the hill. So I think it's a fun map, and with all that said, let's get started. So in the initial stages of the battle, I was telling my ally, Justice, should probably fall back off of this hill because there is a lot going on, and probably we are not going to be able to contest with all of these different units over here. We were hoping that with the Skaven Warp Lightning cannons, we would be able to pull some forces sort of away from the hill, and then I had deployed some forces over here in the woods, which was going to help out when they eventually came to the Skaven, but that was not the case. They instead went straight for the Beastmen, and so the Beastmen had their hands full on the initial trades here. The Beastmen did go with a pretty balanced build, so they have a little bit of anti-air support with the Ungor Raiders, which is something you often don't see Beastmen players do, is bring that anti-air support. They're not the greatest anti-air, but you know, every little bit of damage can help. So this was sort of the initial engagement. The Royal Peg Knights came down and tried to take my mobility off of the field by hitting the Dark Riders, but I think there was a mistake here. I'm just going to slow it down a bit because they engaged when they were close to the Witch Elves. So as soon as the Witch Elves were aware that the Dark Riders were being charged, they ran right in and pinned the Royal Peg Knights, and they were backed up as well by the Black Guard of Nagron. So that is a very, very cost-effective trade for me, and something that I was very much excited about. Meanwhile, I think we should mention the Warp Lightning Cannon is doing some serious work on the Claw of Nagash. The Claw of Nagash is a fantastic unit as long as it stays online. And usually, I mean, if you can get away with it, you want to save it sort of till late game when you can use the terror of the unit to sort of route everything off of the field. So I'm not sure. I mean, if I were the Bretonnian player, as soon as I saw the Black Guard come in, and at this point, actually, I don't even think the Royal Peg Knights are rampaging. As soon as I would see this, I would pull out immediately. And I think the Blood Dragon Vamp Lord is probably just watching and seeing how this is going, trying to figure out maybe if it's worthwhile ganking Malagor. I think he's not really too sure what he's doing right now, but that's probably a 3k unit that's not being used. So I think maybe a breath attack would have been very helpful against the Blackguard or the Witch Elves. And that's it. And if you look, the Blood Dragon Lord has all of his buffs procced right now, and they're sort of going to waste. That is a lot of damage potential that's not being used right now. This is a nice rear charge with some Graveguard on the Blackguard. They're really buckling under the pressure. One thing about the Blackguard is that they are They have very high leadership. So even in situations like this, they can sort of they can sort of deal with the pressure, and also they're immune to psychology. So all of the fear and the terror that can potentially happen and tank the leadership further is not really affecting them right now. And if you look at the balance bar, it's starting to shift a little bit. Skaven's still doing its thing, just sniping out the large targets. And Beastmen are just absolutely going to town on all of this chaff infantry. Gorbals are giving Throg a slapping, as well as a lot of this the Fimir. This is a good trade for the Gorbals. Usually, Fimir are excellent against elite infantry and can serve as pretty good bodyguards for units like Throg. Um, and notably, Throg is escaping and healing up at this point, so maybe not the worst thing in the world, but Maws of Savagery and Fimir are going to take a beating from this engagement. Meanwhile, back at the old encampment here, Blackguard are still going strong, even with Curse of the Midnight Wind. They're doing okay. Now, sorry for getting over to this a little late. So Malkeith came over to help out because the Blackguard, I mean, yes, they're an amazing unit and they can tank for days, but clearly there's a lot of firepower going in against them here. So he came over and he drops his buff, stand your ground, which helps a lot to just keep the Blackguard of Nagrand fighting as long as possible until reinforcements can arrive. And look, I have another group of Blackguard which is coming over, so that's great news for us. And then also another unit of Witch Elves to sort of pin them in place. We did a bit of hokey pokey over here to try and get away from all of this this chaff infantry, zombies, graveguard, and whatever, so that this could get over here. And also brought a Canite Assassin. Forgot to mention that, but he's not doing the most useful thing right now, shooting into some peasant mob, but eventually he will be useful as he comes over here and helps out later on in the fight. So I guess at this point in the battle, my buddy MR has realized, okay, the Rat Ogres, might as well put them to use, and these Storm Vermin, because the Warp Lightning Cannons have been able to fire pretty much untouched. There's not a lot of valuable targets over here, and the ammo is getting a bit lower anyways. So it was good to have him come over and help out a little bit there. Beastmen on this flank, you've got Malagor again just coming in to give a little bit of extra help to these Gorbals, who have now finally finished off the Trolls and the Maws. And the Fimir as well have decided to take a run for the hills. They're terrified. We got a Corpse Cart and Claw of Nagash, which are very helpful units, but they're not with their infantry right now. So they're not really doing what they're supposed to do at this point in time. The Claw of Nagash, it would probably be most helpful over here in this key engagement, where we have the Blackguard, the Witch Elves. I mean, this is the fight that's really going to make or break the game. So I think it headed in the wrong direction here, and by running into some Bleak Swords, you're not really getting max value from that degen effect. I mean, even if he kills these Bleak Swords, what's next? He's going to be walking into two Warp Lightning Cannons, and there's also the Witch Elves to pin him in place once he gets there. And you'll note later in the game that is something that I do. I do try and pin that unit down. So the Warp Lightning Cannons, I guess they got tired of shooting at the Claw of Nagash, because the Claw has pretty good heals and can just kite it out. And so it started sniping out the Blood Dragon Lord. The Hex Race came into this battle, did a rear charge, and it looks like a Chain Lightning has gone down as well. But the Blackguard, they just don't give a shit. They just keep going. They're down to 5 models, but they've racked up 70 kills against very elite units, picked up 5 chevrons at this point. Malkith is being ganked by pretty much everything under the sun. You've got the Peg Knights who've tried to switch onto him, the Paladins, Alberic took his crack at it. Uh, and, there's always been just enough units of infantry to kind of run through and escape while still hitting the stand your ground again and again and again just to keep the infantry fighting. So here comes the Blood Dragon Lord, and I think this might be the part in the battle where Malkeith finally drops. Uh, Blood Dragon Lord tried to catch Malkeith, and thanks to Justice for being alert and screening him out with the Ungor Spearmen. Canine Assassins finally made his way into a place that's useful and helped out with the Paladin. Malkeith is running like hell. Uh, his Word of Pain was also very useful in that fight with the Blackguard, keeping them online. I forgot to mention it. And this is an absolutely wonderful fight for the Gorable. This is exactly what they want to be on, is these big, high-value targets. Yes, the Blood Dragon Lord is an absolute beast, but without support, it's not going to be a cost-effective trade for the Blood Dragon Vamp Lord, especially with these Korok Man Rippers around. These are, designed specifically to take out large targets like that. So at this point in the battle, you can see the bar is shifted pretty much in our favor. There are some inactive units because it's hard to micro all of this, but the key engagements I think have turned decisively in our favor. Malkith just dropped from Alberic, so it wasn't the Blood Dragon Lord after all. But at this point, it's just a question of mopping up. So okay, so here's the final engagement. Norsca's last stand. Throg is like, okay, I've been healing up, doing the troll thing. I'm gonna give it one last effort, and there's no hope at this point. They're wildly outnumbered. Okay, they buckle maybe a few Skaven slaves with spears, but even they're not afraid at this point. So yeah, bad news for Norsca, but a good game overall, and well played to both sides. Some interesting tactics there. So just to go over the screens really quickly here. So the Dark Elves, this is, the Dark Elves, they're known as being a rush faction. They're known as having very heavy infantry. So the key with the Dark Elves, you just want to generally pin the other team in place and get them to fight your infantry and hopefully not take too much damage from artillery in the meantime. So I think for the most part I was able to do that. The Blackguard were absolutely invaluable in dealing with those large units. MR Defender, he did the traditional Skaven thing, but he did it very well. Screened out with a lot of chaff. Warp Lightning Cannons did their thing. Justice was very helpful in that battle because he was cleaning up all the chaff infantry, and he had the Ungor Spear Raiders to give a little bit of the Ungor Raiders to put a little bit of pressure in the air, which is nice. Vamp counts, I mean, the Blood Dragon Lord is fantastic, but you have to make sure it's kind of active at all times and doing the work. Claw of Nagash, same thing. It's easy to get it sniped. If it's not being sniped, it's very valuable. So tough to get it in the right spots there. Maybe if it was on the far side of the hill, it could have been shielded from the Skaven artillery, and it could have helped out a little bit more with the Beastmen, where it couldn't be sniped. If I were the Vamp counts, probably that's what I would have done, is really commit to beating up on the Beastmen and wheel the Blood Dragon Lord and the Claw of Nagash over there. White Knight, he had a very nice aerial force. Unfortunately for him, no one on our team had any units in the air, so it was a lot of air power, I think, that was wasted, and even he took a Damsel of Heavens to really tilt the balance of the air fight in his favor. Maybe he was hoping to find Malkeith on a dragon, but having Malkeith on the ground, yes, he did eventually kill him, but a lot of his units got bogged down in very not cost-efficient trades. And just the one thing about the peasant mob, I mean, peasant mobs are great for maybe buying his air force some time and just bogging down units, but you're not going to win the battle with peasant mob alone. And ganking leadership against high leadership factions is probably not the best. Well, I mean, it can work, but it's not going to win you the game alone. You need something to follow up with it. And the peasant mob, I think they're most effectively used when screening for artillery. Um, but maybe there are different philosophies on that. And then the last one, Norsca, I think Norsca ran a very balanced build. I think they did what they needed to do. Marauder Hunters were an interesting pick. I haven't seen too much value out of them personally. And I think some of this armor pen from the Marauder Hunters, Norse Controls, and Premier Warriors was probably unfortunately lost on the Beastmen. So, the Marauders were, I think, in their element, but in terms of real killing power versus Beastmen, I think he would have been much better off just having some Berserkers. So it was maybe an unfortunate deployment for Norsca there. But overall, great game, very fun, and look forward to playing against everyone and with my friends as well again soon. Thank you. Bye bye.